Hey folks, how's it going? Now I know what you're thinking. How do I get more Yorkshire pudding into my life? I mean, you probably weren't thinking that, but I bet you are now. Today, I want to share with you my easy, mostly hands-off recipe for a great British classic, toad in the hole. First appearing in British cookbooks around the middle of the 18th century, but with a history going back way before that. Pigeon in a hole, anyone? This dish combines delicious pork sausages, a sumptuous caramelised onion gravy, 0 toads, and all tied together in a fantastic Yorkshire pudding. What more could you possibly wish for? Now the clock is ticking, folks, so let's get to it. The first thing we need to get started on is our onions. Caramelising these is going to take at least 40 minutes plus a few more to make them into a gravy. For that, I'll just cut off the tops, halve and then peel 2 good sized white onions. This might seem like more than you need, but trust me, these will lose a ton of water while they cook. Once they're peeled and any leathery outer layers are removed, I'll chop those into good sized rustic slices, roughly following the grain and shape of the onion. I left the root intact because habit, but you could take it off beforehand if you like and just slice. For me, it's an extra cut. Once I've made my slices, take off the root and the slices will just fall apart. Whichever way you go, you should end up with some nice solid slices like this. Once that's done, I'll set a regular saucepan over a medium-high heat and melt 40 grams or 1.5 ounces of butter. I use salted butter for pretty much anything, but we will be adding more salt later, so if that's a concern to you, feel free to use unsalted here. Once the butter is nicely melted and foaming, in go my onions. I'll follow that with a good pinch of salt, maybe a teaspoon or so, and a small pinch of sugar. Whatever you have on hand is fine. This is just regular granulated, but dark sugars like muscovado work well too. There's more sugar than you might think in an onion, and that will release and caramelise during cooking, so this pinch is just to help get things started. I'll give everything a good stir around to distribute the seasoning and coat everything in the butter, and then I'll turn down the heat to its lowest setting, move this over to my small burner and just let it hang out there, uncovered, with an occasional light stir to stop anything burning. With the onions taken care of, let's move on to our Yorkshire batter. I made a whole video on Yorkshires, which I'll link here, also in the description, in case that didn't work, so I won't go into too much detail. This is just the same 1-1-1 by volume batter that I talked about in that video. I'm going to be making 2 servings today, so I'll measure out 2 eggs into a glass, or measuring jug if you prefer, and then the same volume of milk and also flour. As usual, I'll season the flour now because I won't get a chance to do it later. Once these are in the oven, the door is closed for the duration. To mix these up, I'll grab a large mixing bowl and add in just the eggs and flour to begin with. I'm using a whisk today and starting slow to avoid whisking flour all over the kitchen. Once the dry flour is mostly gone, I'll speed up a little bit and make sure I have a nice smooth batter before I start to add the milk. A little at a time, ensuring all the lumps are whisked out between each addition. That's all there is to it. We can go ahead and set this batter aside for a while. Don't put it in the fridge. It won't be sitting out for too long, and if it's too cold, you won't get the rise we're after. A short rest at room temperature is totally perfect here. My plan today is to do 2 individual toads in the hole. Toad in the holes? I don't know. So I'll take my largest ceramic Yorkshire pudding ramekins. Again, watch the video linked in the description to hear me talk more about that. And I'll give them a good squeeze of any high smoke point oil. I'm using sunflower today. If you're feeling decadent, you could add in a little bit of beef dripping or duck fat at this point too. I don't have it and don't feel like dealing with the extra smoke today anyway. These go into my heaviest baking tray, or sheet pan if you prefer, and into a cold oven, which I'll turn on to preheat to 220C 430F convection. We'll let that fully preheat and then we'll give it 5 more minutes to really get the oil good and hot. I'm going to serve this with mashed potatoes today, so while the oil preheats, I'll make a start on my potatoes. These are just a well-known commercial variety of red potatoes that, despite a bit of research, I've only been able to identify as rooster. They're on the floury end of the spectrum, but slightly more waxy than, say, Maris Piper, which makes them great for mashing. Oh, and check out my new Mr. Spud peeler I got for Christmas. Fun and useful at the same time. Speaking of fun and useful, if you're finding this video fun and or useful so far, then I would love it if you could take a moment to bash the like button down below. It lets me know you like this kind of thing and it really helps the channel. So I'll give these a quick peel and then roughly chop them up into similar sized pieces. I'm looking for about 1 inch cubes or equivalent mass thereof to ensure even cooking. Once they're all chopped, I'll take them over to the sink and give them a good rinse. You see how the water's cloudy? That's excess starch and it will make your mash gluey. Good solid rinse in cold water to get as much of that off as possible. If we were making aligo, this starch would be a good thing, but for plain old mash, not so much. Get rid of it. Now that the water is nice and clear, I'll move this onto the hob over a medium-high heat and add in a good pinch of salt to help season the potatoes internally as they cook. Adding this now makes it much easier to get a nice even seasoning throughout a finished product. This is just regular old cooking salt, no need for fancy salt flakes here, save those for finishing. While I'm here, I'll check on my onions and give them a quick stir around. Don't be heavy-handed here, just a quick gentle toss to ensure nothing's drying out and they're good. One of the things I always say is get to know your local butcher. I'm a huge fan of supporting local business in general. I think it's good for all of us. However, this week my local butcher is closed for refurbishment. So I'm going to use for today's recipe these Asda extra special classic pork sausages, and these will be fine. Not as good as the local butcher, but what can you do? Our oil should be good and hot by now, so let's carefully take that out of the oven and onto the board. Before we get started on the Yorkshire itself, I want to get a bit of pre-colour on the sausages, so I'll carefully lay 2 sausages per portion into the oil. Notice how they sizzle and almost deep fry immediately. This is telling us that the oil's plenty hot enough. 8 to 10 minutes later and it's time to pull those sausages and add our Yorkshire batter, but we'll need to work quickly. So before we do that, let's give our batter a quick stir. If you want to get fancy and add some dried herbs, this would be the time to do it. Thyme is good, as is rosemary. I wouldn't use fresh as it will probably burn, but you do you. Pull the sausages from the oven and quickly add batter to each ramekin. Add just enough to cover the bottom of the ramekin. If you add too much, it will end up doughy. Now personally, for toading the whole, I like to walk the fine line between crispy and doughy, so I'm adding a little more here than you would if you wanted it to be a thin and crispy base. If that's your thing, go with a little bit less batter than I am. Working quickly, but carefully, this stuff is hot. Get these back in the oven, still at 220C, and set a timer for 30 minutes. After 10 minutes, we'll turn that oven down to 170C, 340F, so our Yorkshire can cook properly on the bottom without burning on the top. Now let's take a look at our onions. Those are starting to caramelise nicely, so I'll go ahead and lightly stir them, then put a lid on them and let them continue to hang out on that low heat. The potatoes, these are fork tender too, so it's time to drain them and let them steam for a while to dry out before we mash them. If you're using real stock for the gravy, you can go ahead and skip this step, but if you have stock pots or bouillon cubes, hey, no judgment here, that need to be mixed with water, then grab a good sized mug and reserve as much of that potato water as possible. It'll add an extra dimension to your gravy that you wouldn't get with plain water. Then just drain the potatoes into a colander in the sink, give them a light toss to drain, and leave them to steam for 10 minutes or so. 10 more minutes later and the onions are good and caramelised, so it's time to start on the gravy. For this, I'll remove the lid from the pan and add in a little balsamic vinegar. This will bring a nice acid note to cut through the richness of the gravy. No need to use the expensive stuff here, I'm using this brand today. Others are available, hashtag not an ad. Maybe a couple of teaspoons of that and a good stir to combine. Then just let that simmer until fully reduced and the onions go back to frying. You'll hear the sound change when that happens. As soon as it does, I'll add in 30 grams, about 4 tablespoons of flour and give it another stir. And then just let this cook over low heat, stirring regularly but gently until the raw flour smell is gone and it's looking nicely browned. You might find you need to add a touch more butter here to loosen things up. If so, go for it, but not too much. A little goes a long way. While that's cooking, we'll start bringing our potatoes together in the same pan they boiled in. I'll warm 100 ml of milk. I like full fat, but your mileage may vary. And into that, melt 50 grams or 2 ounces of butter. I'm going to add cheese to this, so that's enough fat for me, but if you don't want cheddar mash, then maybe double up on the butter here. Once that's all melted and hot, take it off the heat and carefully add the potatoes before going in with your masher and giving them a good mash. Once they're mostly broken down, I'll add in maybe 150 to 200 grams or 5 to 7 ounces of grated cheese. I like a nice mature cheddar, but use whatever you like. Half a teaspoon of English mustard is also great here for both colour and flavour. I forgot to add it while filming, but go ahead and add it if you have it to hand. You won't regret it. So mash, mash, mash to get everything combined and then check the seasoning. Mine needs more salt, so I'll add that along with a dash of white pepper. Always good in mashed potatoes, in my opinion. Then I'll just cover this with a lid and let it relax in the pan while I finish off the gravy. The roux should be good and cooked by now and should smell faintly nutty. This is exactly what we're aiming for. Take off the heat and add in 500 ml, just under a pint, or just over a pint if you're in the US. Hashtag confusing. A little at a time. Resist the urge to go too quickly here or you'll end up with lumpy gravy. Just keep adding a little and completely stirring it in each time. It'll get kind of thick and weird at first, but keep going. It'll all work out in the end. Once it's added, move it back over medium heat and let it come to a boil to thicken and reduce till it's a nice gravy consistency. As always, the final step is to check for seasoning. Mine's good, adjust yours to taste, and we can finally get this thing plated up. I'm just going to plate my sausagey Yorkshire, add a dollop of that cheesy mashed potato, and top it all with the awesome gravy. This is real comfort food, folks, in true British style. Enjoy it all year round, but it's especially great in the cold winter months. I really hope you give this recipe a try soon. Let me know in the comments how you made it your own, and thanks for watching the video. See you next time.